This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Celia Hatton, and at 14 hours GMT on Monday, the 17th of August, these are our top stories. President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner has held talks with the Israeli Prime Minister as he seeks to advance a US-backed peace plan for Gaza. China's leader has praised the bloody suppression of 1989's Tiananmen Square demonstrations, a rare mention of the protests that briefly threatened the ruling Communist Party. And Hayden, best known for her roles in the TV shows Heroes and Nashville, has died at the age of 36. Also in this podcast, Britain's Prime Minister exchanges messages with an imposter.
Was that a prank, or was that much more seriously possibly a national security service trying to compromise him? Could his phone have been compromised? Many questions that we don't know the answer to.
We start in the Middle East and the Trump administration's attempts to revive the floundering peace plan for Gaza. The U.S. Middle East envoy, Jared Kushner, has taken on that task. He arrived in Israel and has been meeting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for talks. Last month, Donald Trump announced that his Board of Peace had reached an historic deal for Gaza, but progress ground to a halt after Israel bluntly rejected the proposal. On Sunday, Jared Kushner gave an indication of how far the U.S. is willing to go to put the deal back on track when he had traveled to Egypt for an unusual meeting with Hamas officials. Mr. Kushner is reported to have pushed Hamas for a disarmament that would be verifiable. That's a key demand of Israel, which has refused to withdraw from Gaza until the group gives up its weapons. Earlier, I asked our correspondent Yolan Nell in Jerusalem if there are any signs of progress towards a deal.
A spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister only confirmed to the BBC that this meeting between Jared Kushner and the Israeli Prime Minister was underway earlier. But this happens after he met Hamas officials in this rare meeting in Egypt, along with other senior representatives of the Board of Peace, Nikolai Mladenov, who's the High Commissioner for Gaza, and also the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. They were in Egypt along with regional mediators, meeting this Hamas delegation reportedly for about 2 hours to discuss Hamas commitments. Now, Hamas has been saying that it will not implement this roadmap that it's agreed with the Board of Peace that would see it completely disarming unless Israel signs up to the deal. It involves a phased withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and of course the Israeli Prime Minister totally rejected that roadmap, speaking in meetings with his cabinet. That's quite unusual for Israel to completely defy its closest ally, the US, and President Trump.
So we've heard some opposition from Israel so far, but there is growing pressure from the United States for Israel to accept some sort of deal. What can Jared Kushner do to nudge Benjamin Netanyahu towards agreeing to this proposal?
That's right. I mean, they really want to show these members of the Board of Peace that they can keep President Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza, announced in a great ceremony last October as a ceasefire plan took hold. They want to show that this is still alive. And they'll be giving reassurances from Hamas about its commitment to disarmament and about the verification process that has been agreed as part of this roadmap. I think they will also be looking to Israel to meet Hamas's demands in terms of making sure that they stick to their commitments for the first stage of the already agreed ceasefire when it comes to humanitarian matters, when it comes to stopping military attacks on Gaza, because although there was a brief lull in those about a week ago, they have resumed in recent days, with Israel saying that it is targeting what it calls terrorists from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Really, when you look in the Israeli media about what Israel's concerns are here, they say that Israel wants also reassurances that these weapons will be put fully out of use, that many of them will be destroyed, not just stored by this Palestinian technocratic committee that is due to go into Gaza. They want reassurances that Qatar and Turkey will not be too involved in the verification process to make sure that Hamas meets its commitments, because there is mistrust there. And when it comes to sequencing, they have been saying that they want to have genuine disarmament, full disarmament by Hamas before there'll be Israeli troop withdrawal. They're not agreeing to a phased withdrawal at this time.
Yolande, what more can you tell me about the domestic political calculations that Benjamin Netanyahu is making? We know he's moving towards a general election for Israel in late October.
That's right. And in that general election, polls indicate that the Prime Minister's Likud party is currently struggling in the polls. There's a lot of pressure coming from members of the coalition, the governing coalition, especially those on the far right, to take a much harsher approach when it comes to Gaza. So it's been much commented on how the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has just recently given a podcast interview in which he's calling for targeted assassinations to resume in Gaza on a nightly basis, killing 30 to 40 people. And he's specifying they don't need to be those who pose an immediate threat to Israel. So that gives you a taste of some of the political discourse right now.
And Yolande, last, why do you think the United States is trying to revive a push towards a peace plan for Gaza right now? Some might say, well, actually, the Trump administration should be focusing on the conflict with Iran.
I mean, this is really, part of President Trump's desperation to show that he has got a foreign policy win here. He really hailed it last month as being a major breakthrough, which is something that many analysts agreed with at the time. This idea that he had secured through the Board of Peace a commitment from Hamas to full disarmament, because this has been seen as being a major sticking point. I think there are many in the US administration that really want to advance President Trump's peace plan. And of course, it is indirectly related to achieving a broader regional peace, because Iran has been demanding that a ceasefire between the US and Israel and Iran should also apply to other countries in the region where it has proxies, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, and also when it comes to Gaza and Hamas.
Let's go to China now. The country's leader, Xi Jinping, has made a rare reference to events that happened in 1989, when an undisclosed number of pro-democracy demonstrators were killed by the Chinese military near Beijing's Tiananmen Square. The BBC's Kate Adie was in Beijing then. She described at that time the famous images of an unidentified man blocking a column of military tanks.
Just after midday, the tanks rolled out of the square. A lone young man stood in front of the first one. The tank faltered, came to a stop. The others behind.
On Monday, Xi Jinping made a speech to mark the 100th anniversary of the birth of the former leader Jiang Zemin, who died 4 years ago. In it, he praised the ruling Communist Party's decision to clamp down on the Tiananmen protests, events which eventually fueled Mr. Jiang's elevation to the highest office in China. Addressing thousands of party officials and delegates in Beijing's Great Hall of the People, which is right on Tiananmen Square, Mr. Xi also called on his country to show a fighting spirit as it faced what he described as tough times. Our China correspondent Steve McDonald joined us from Beijing.
This is what I think it's all about. Let's talk in a moment about Tiananmen Square in 1989 and those events. But really what this is all about is Xi Jinping trying to neutralize the impact on his government from another leader who's already dead. Now, the reason is that this is the anniversary of Jiang Zemin's birth. And there have been these documentaries on television. Now, he came in and took control of China immediately after those Tiananmen Square events. But following that, the period of his leadership is considered by many people in China to have been a fantastic time. Reform and opening up, everything's getting better and better. The economy's improving, everyone's freer. At least, that's the imagery of it. And the contrast, of course, will be to the current leadership and his style when things are seen to be being more clamped down. The economy is not going as well. What's made this even worse is that Jiang Zemin's number 2 leader, Zhu Rongji, he died just a couple of days ago and his funeral is tomorrow. And so this puts even more emphasis on that previous government, their way of doing things. And so for Xi Jinping, he doesn't want people to be talking all about the reform and opening up, how good the economy was. He wants to try and refocus attention on the fact that Jiang Zemin was a tough communist leader just after Tiananmen Square. Now, people will debate about whether or not he was or he wasn't, but you can see he's trying to sort of make out that there's this unbroken connection between the great things that Jiang Zemin did and the great things that I'm doing, instead of people focusing on the differences.
Interesting, though, but Xi Jinping did mention some serious challenges facing China right now. Without going into detail, do we know what he was referring to?
Well, nobody can deny that the economy is not going great for China, even though it's weathered the storm of tariffs from the US pretty well. I mean, look, youth unemployment, the property crisis keeps going. There's just such an overall problem with domestic demand and just not a spirit of optimism. He's got to acknowledge that, because otherwise it would seem like he's in la-la land. Now, it's not desperation stakes, but the problem is all the things that are going really well with the economy, all the new stuff, whether it be robotics or electric vehicles or AI, they don't employ that many people. And so they're not soaking up all the graduates. They're not putting money in the pockets of that many ordinary Chinese people. And while things are going okay, they don't feel like they're getting better and better and better and better as they were during Jiang Zemin's time.
Okay.
Hence the need to, as I said before, neutralise that threat.
Stephen, just briefly, do you think it's a bit risky for Xi Jinping to bring up the events of 1989 to revive people's memories of what happened back then? Because right now it's quite taboo to mention it in China.
Yeah, it is funny. I mean, as you know, it hardly ever gets mentioned. And he didn't really specifically... He didn't use the word Tiananmen Square or uprising or anything, or crushing that or anything like that. He just spoke about the problems during that time. So it was pretty opaque, although most Chinese people would get the reference.
Around the world, people in the film and television industry are paying tribute to the American actress Hayden Panettiere, who's died at the age of 36. It's not yet clear how she died. Ms. Panettiere's career spanned 3 decades. She began when she was a young child and went on to score roles in hit television shows and films, including the Scream horror franchise and the TV series Heroes, and also Nashville. She spoke to BBC Breakfast in 2013 about Nashville and the difficulties she faced in the spotlight.
There's a lot of judgment, which is interesting because people ask me all the time where I pull this character from. Whether it's a country music artist, other country music artists, and I go, actually, just because I didn't grow up in the country music industry, we're all in the same lunchroom, we're just eating at different lunch tables. I still grew up a young person in the spotlight, dealing with a lot of scrutiny and a lot of judgment.
Our culture reporter Yasmin Rufo told me more.
She really did have such a varied career, but also a career that spanned almost her entire lifetime. Back in May, she told CBS News that she was just 8 months old when her mum was taking her to auditions. By the time she was 5, she'd appeared in 50-odd commercials. Like you mentioned there, she was 4 when she appeared in the US soap One Life to Live. She then went on in her teenage years to star in A Bug's Life and Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington, before becoming that household name as cheerleader Claire Bennett in that hit sci-fi series Heroes. Then in Nashville, like you heard in that clip there, it was a totally different side of her, playing an up-and-coming country singer Juliet Barnes. She actually performed the songs on the show as well, which will end up in the charts at the time, and she earned 2 Golden Globe nominations. And then she was in countless other films, the Scream franchises, the Bring It On, All or Nothing, and, various other TV and film throughout her career.
I mean, she did so much in her career. It's hard to believe that she's now died just at the young age of 36. I mean, can you tell me more? She talked about struggles going on in her life.
Yeah, I think one of the important things is that her legacy isn't just being this incredible actress, but also being someone that was very open about some really extremely difficult periods in her life. She published her memoir in May, This Is Me, A Reckoning, it's called, and in that she really details things like growing up in the industry and how difficult that was for her, addiction that she battled, substance abuse, and her later recovery. She also spoke a lot about the postpartum depression she experienced after giving birth to her daughter in 2014, and then later her decision to give her daughter's father Ukrainian boxer Vladimir Klitschko full custody of the child. And I think one of the reasons that she's been so vocal on this is that she said she's always wanted other people to know that they weren't alone in that situation. So she opened up about postpartum depression as a way to help other people talk about it. Similarly, she's spoken about things like the domestic abuse she's experienced in her life as a way to help inspire other people. So I think it's really important to see her legacy not just as one of a successful actress who was in all of these brilliant TV and film shows, but as someone that really wanted to talk honestly and willingly about some of the experiences and the challenges that come with growing up in the spotlight.
Still to come in this podcast, it's a Ferrari, but not like you've previously known it. And it's just sold for $40 million. The rapper Tupac Shakur was gunned down on the Las Vegas Strip nearly 30 years ago, becoming an unsolved killing that has haunted the world of hip-hop for 3 decades. Now, Dwayne "Keefe D. Davis, a self-described former gang leader, is standing trial for his murder. The BBC's Shaima Khalil is following the case.
Tupac Shakur is still one of the most influential rappers of all time. In 1996, he was at the height of his career. That same year, he was gunned down, shot on the Las Vegas Strip. His older brother, Mopreme Shakur, remembers getting the call.
Worried. I was just worried how bad it was. All I had known, he got shot. So until I reached Vegas, I didn't know the status of things. And Pac was a tough little dude. He had already survived being shot 5 times. And I was just praying that it wasn't as worse as it was.
Nearly 30 years on, the only man ever charged over his killing is on trial. Dwayne "Keefe D. Davis has pleaded not guilty. This all goes back to the night of September the 7th, 1996, when cameras captured Tupac and his entourage attacking Keefe D's nephew in the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Hours later, a white Cadillac pulled alongside the car Tupac was in. The rapper was shot 4 times and died 6 days later.
Tupac was just a fascinating character. I mean, every aspect of him. He provides good, just dance tracks, just make you feel just like you want to just, cruise with your windows down. But he also makes you want to stop and think about, social justice issues and sit down and actually parse his lyrics.
Hey, Keith, Metro Police, come over here. Hey,
for decades, there was no arrest and no trial. Then in 2023, Keefe D was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, which he denies.
Pick that foot up. You ready?
I'm a pro, dude. Much of the evidence against Keefe D comes from his own words. In his memoir, he says that Tupac's attacking his nephew was the ultimate green light to do something. He then describes being in the Cadillac and supplying the gun. Prosecutors say this is his account of masterminding the attack, but Keefe D now says this was fiction to sell books.
Prosecutors must now convince the jury that Keefe D's story was an admission, not an invention. Mopreme says he's cautiously optimistic, but says no verdict can give him what he truly wants.
I want my brother back. Period. Dot. I want my little brother back. Pac didn't get a trial. He just got a death sentence. The amount of pain, distress, heartache that the family has gone through and Pac's fans have gone through, it's unmatched.
Now to a potential hoax involving the British Prime Minister Andy Burnham. He's reported to have exchanged messages with someone posing as a senior member of the U.S. government, the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. But that person was not who they were pretending to be. Our political correspondent Damian Grammaticus is following this for us.
What we do know is that Andy Burnham engaged in some sort of message exchange, and it appears that he was responding to something and, as you say, thought that that was Donald Trump's Chief of Staff. Officially, the government here will not comment because they say that this is a national security matter. But what we understand from conversations is that we're told that nothing of significance was exchanged. There was no verbal communication, and that this was then reported to security authorities as soon as suspicions were raised. But real important questions: why did Andy Burnham engage with someone he seems he didn't know? Why then did he sort of exchange messages with them? Was that a prank, or was that much more seriously possibly a national security service trying to compromise him? Could his phone have been compromised? Many questions that we don't know the answer to.
And I'm sure some embarrassment on the Burnham side as well. But this isn't the first time, is it, that a UK high-level politician has been tricked into messaging with someone who isn't who they thought they were?
No, absolutely. And that is also, I think, instructive here, because 2 years ago, the then Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, who had been Prime Minister, he messaged and then he took part in a video call with someone who he thought was a prior Ukrainian President, Petro Poroshenko. Now, he became suspicious after that. 2 years before that, the then Defense Secretary, Ben Wallace, also had a video chat with someone he thought was a Ukrainian Prime Minister, and they even discussed UK possible deployment of warships, a nuclear weapons issue with Ukraine. That was blamed on Russia. A video was released online, an edited video. The interesting thing here, I think, is that all those were calls that were put through from switchboards and government departments. This was something that Andy Burnham seems to have engaged in, again, why there are questions.
Interesting. And Andy Burnham is keen to come across as someone who's very approachable. But moving forward, do you think his team is going to have to change how they do things, perhaps, and maybe do a little bit more vetting before he engages and messages with someone?
Well, that certainly has been his sort of public profile, if you like, has been someone who's keen to talk, keen to engage, keen to listen and hear from people. I think the issue that this raises exactly is that why did he do that in this case? But it appears to have happened since he entered Downing Street, perhaps in the early days, and it appears that I'm sure his team will have learned messages from this. Usually in this instance, I think you'd expect a government-to-government communication to come through an embassy, through diplomatic sources, through the Foreign Office. Of course, leaders nowadays do communicate back and forth on WhatsApp, but certainly I think they will be much more cautious here about who he does engage with.
To Zambia now. Let's get the latest on the aftermath of the presidential election last Thursday. With more than half the votes counted, officials say the current president is pulling ahead. But while the counting is going on, there's political turmoil unfolding elsewhere. The government says the security forces have arrested 11 people involved in an alleged insurrection plot. They say the main opposition candidate was found at the scene of the raid where they seized weapons. Dingindaba Boyoya is in Zambia for us.
The details of this, are quite scanty at the moment. The government issued a statement yesterday simply saying that they found a group of people who were in possession of what they've described as high-grade military equipment, military weapons. And as a result of that, there was some sort of exchange of fire. There are no details on whether or not anyone was injured from there. But the opposition NRPUP leader, Brian Mundubile, says that some of his team members were shot and their whereabouts are unknown. In fact, they've gone to the extent to suggest that some of these people actually died. The government had initially refused that there was any such thing. They yesterday did come out to issue a statement saying that a raid did in fact happen on Friday.
Now, this is just the latest chapter and what's been quite a dramatic election, with some criticizing how it's been carried out. Can you take us through the campaign and through some of the challenges that we've seen with the vote?
The observers that have spoken out now have said that the campaign period was fairly peaceful, even election day itself. However, there were concerns around how the election was conducted with regards to fairness. The Electoral Commission of Zambia had put out a schedule within which presidential candidates would campaign in various parts of the country, but that schedule was not applicable to the president and vice president, who would go anywhere at whatever time. And some of these stakeholders felt that that wasn't fair. Voting day itself brought its own issues. While it was largely peaceful, counting of votes on Friday was suspended, and it was suspended by the Electoral Commission of Zambia across the country because they said there were some polling stations where ballot papers had been stolen, ballot boxes had been stolen. Now, there are no details of where these ballot boxes were stolen from and where this violence occurred. And some observers have said this lack of detail is creating the impression that, the Electoral Commission may be hiding something.
And now the incumbent is pulling ahead in the vote count. Will that help settle things?
At the moment, the situation in the country is pretty calm. There's police presence in a lot of densely populated areas because there was some sort of unrest on Friday, on the 14th of August, when Brian Mundubile had claimed victory of the election. Some of his supporters had taken, to the streets. And so there's been a deployment of heavy police presence and military presence, actually, in a lot of the streets of densely populated areas. With regards to whether the vote has credibility, there's already a dispute. The opposition, NRPUP, are saying that what they're describing as industrial scale rigging, that's what they're calling it. They've not brought forth any evidence of it at the moment, but they are clearly disputing what is being announced by the Electoral Commission of Zambia.
And since we spoke to Dingindaba Boyoya in Zambia, the main opposition party has rejected government accusations that its members were involved in plotting an insurrection at the time of the election. Now, when you think of a Ferrari sports car, you probably think of the roar of an engine, usually accompanied by a tiny number of passenger seats and a slick exterior. But now something new for the Italian car company, a very quiet electric car. And the first one off the production line is making headlines after being sold at a charity auction. Maura Fogarty is our Asia business editor in Singapore. She told me how much that car sold for.
So the Luce, which means light in Italian, at an auction in California over the weekend, sold for $40 million. Now that's the highest price ever at an auction for a brand new car. We've had higher prices, of course, for kind of vintage cars, but for a brand new car just off the production line, this was the highest price ever. Now this Luce was designated as a chassis zero, meaning it's the first of its kind of this new series of electric vehicles that Ferrari is unveiling. So it was quite surprising that it sold for this amount of money, and I'm sure Ferrari is feeling pretty good about it as well. All the proceeds from the sale, according to Sotheby's auction house, goes towards the Ferrari Foundation's educational programs.
So I guess this was a bit of welcome news as well for Ferrari, because the car company did receive a bit of backlash when it first announced it was going to be making these cars.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, we saw the share price of Ferrari drop after it unveiled the car. And a lot of the criticism was based over a few things. First was how it looked. Many people, or the critics of the car, the Luce, said that the car looks like any other vehicle. It looks like a normal electric vehicle. It didn't look special. It didn't look Ferrari, for example. It did have a very kind of star brand name designer working with the Luce, and that's Sir Johnny Ive, who worked at Apple previously. He then started his own design agency and worked with Ferrari on designing the interiors of the car. So the first criticism was around how it actually looked. The second one was the fact that Ferrari was making an electric vehicle in the first place, that, it didn't have that combustion engine roar of a sports car. It had 5 seats, for goodness sake. That was another criticism, that it wasn't a real car, a real Ferrari car. It was just any other car. So the criticisms were twofold. One around how it looked, and one around the fact that it was diluting the Ferrari brand because it wasn't a typical Ferrari car and it was an electric vehicle.
It's interesting, though, to see that Ferrari and some other European automakers are starting to move into the world of electric vehicles with real gusto, because in China, in the region where you're sitting right now, in Singapore, China is already dominating the world of electric vehicles by far.
It certainly is, and it does show that Ferrari and other European car makers are trying to, at least at the high end of the market, target a specific type of buyer, right? I should mention, too, that when Ferrari announced the Luce, it said it didn't give exact numbers, but there was an expectation, according to reports, that it wanted to sell just under 500 of these cars by the end of this year. Ferrari says it has met those sales targets already. And don't forget, the actual Luce sells for about $640,000 per car. Now, you mentioned the Chinese car market, or at least the Chinese EV suppliers. They definitely dominate the world when it comes to electric vehicles. We've actually seen the number of Chinese EVs exported around the world just in the first half of this year. I've got some figures for you here. They were up 120% in the first 6 months of this year compared to the year ago period. So we're seeing Chinese car makers really exporting as many cars as they can for several reasons. One is because they've got problems at home where you've got the Chinese car buyer pulling back on spending, and so we're seeing EV car sales falling domestically, but overseas, and of course you've got the the conflict in the Middle East and higher oil prices. That's all helping to make the case for consumers to go electric.
And that's all for this edition of the Global News Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, our details are below. I'm Celia Hatton. Bye-bye.